I think as the world gets more and more complex, there's more and more need for human factors.
Welcome to HFIG Talks, a podcast produced by the Human Factors Interest Group at the University of Toronto. HFIG is the student chapter of the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society at the University of Toronto and consists of students, faculty, and local professionals who are interested in the field of human factors. My name's Chelsea. If you missed our first episode, I'm the current co-president of HFIG, and I'll be hosting today's episode. So our next few episodes will be a series on the Human Factors Research Group at UofT. So each episode will be talking to a different professor in the Human Factors Group to hear about their research and how they came to be a prof at UofT. And up first for today's episode, we have HFIG's faculty advisor, Professor Mark Chignell.
I'm Mark Chignell. I'm a Human Factors Engineering prof at the University of Toronto. I've been there since 1990, and I run a lab called the Interactive Media Lab. And we tend to focus on the HCI side of human factors, looking at how people work with technology and how to improve the interfaces between people and technology.
So tell us a little bit about how you became a prof at UofT. Like, what was your journey here?
Sure. Well, I started out in psychology. So I was at a university in New Zealand, and I did my PhD there, and it was kind of a teaching university, so it wasn't very prominent. And then I went to Australia and I taught psychology for a couple of years as a tutor and then a senior tutor at Monash University in Melbourne. And that was a dead-end job. So you had about a 4 years position and then it finished. So after about a year, I started talking to a guy called Tom Triggs, who had been in the States and had his PhD, I think, in Michigan. And he was doing work on driving and decision-making. And he encouraged me to get a postdoc at the US so I could get into a research career. So that's what I did. And I left Australia and went to Ohio State and did a postdoc with a guy called Lester Kruger. And he was working on psychophysics. So I was doing visual psychophysics for a year. So then I got the opportunity to do a master's in industrial engineering. And since the job market for academic psychology was terrible at that time, I took it up. And I worked with a guy called Phil Smith at Ohio State and on expert systems. I did a minor in AI and rebranded myself as an industrial engineer.
How did that, come about that you were in psychology and then you happened into industrial engineering?
Yeah, so I knew nothing about industrial engineering, never even heard the discipline. But then I forget how I found out or how I met, but I did end up meeting this guy, Phil Smith. And he said, why don't you come back and do a master's? Now, that might seem a little bit strange because I already had a postdoc. But to me, it was like, well, it's really hard to get a job at the moment in psychology. And I can write some papers. And I can also get another degree, for a year. And I'll get funding from Phil. So it seemed like an easy decision. And once I made it, my story is that in 1983, when I applied for all these psychology jobs, I applied for 50 jobs and all I could get were 2 more postdocs. And so it was easy to come back. And then in 1984, when I applied for jobs, I applied for 2 jobs in industrial engineering, one at Penn State and one at USC, University of Southern California, and I got them both. So the job market was just completely different. In the early 80s, industrial engineering was really expanding, whereas psychology, you had a whole lot of profs left over from the 60s who weren't going anywhere.
And so then I guess, where did you end up after, which job did you take and how did you end up at UofT?
Yeah, so I went to University of Southern California. I was there for 6 years in the Industrial and Systems Engineering program, and it was good training. I mean, I was working on an NSF grant, and I really got to see, how the American academic system worked, I think, at least from the point of view of a private university. But a few years, and I forget whether it was 1986 or 1988, but at some point I went to a conference in Atlanta. It was IEEE SMC, and I met Paul Milgram there, and we hit it off pretty well. And so he started a kind of an email exchange, and I think that helped. And then I tried a couple of places. I interviewed at Illinois, and I interviewed at Purdue, and then it was third time lucky with Toronto. And I think it was in 1989 I interviewed there, and or early 90, and I managed to get the job.
And you've been here ever since.
And I've been here ever since. I felt, when I came to U of T, I felt like I'd died and gone to heaven. I love the place. I love the university. I love the Human Factors group. I really like the department.
Awesome. So I guess maybe describe a little bit more about what your lab does specifically and some of the things you're working on right now.
Yeah, so the lab traditionally has been concerned with interactive media, new media, and the use of digital technologies by people. And but over the years, we've had different foci or different ways of looking at things. And these days, maybe because I'm aging, I've become interested in aging, and we had a lot of funding from the National Center of Excellence, Age Well, which is concerned with aging. So that's a big focus. And we have a startup, Centivisor, in the lab that is busy trying to make products. So that's very exciting. Aside from that, we have a cybersecurity focus, and that just came about because we were asked by Sun Life to help out with looking at cybersecurity in their context. So that's funding 3 students in the lab, and is leading to a kind of a set of research on interactive machine learning. We're looking at the role of human experts working with algorithms to solve difficult problems, such as detecting malicious events within a corporate network. And then with the other stream of research we're doing is on data science. And I have a really excellent data scientist working with me. She's doing her second PhD. Her name is Lu Wang. And we have several projects with St. Mike's Hospital and with some other locations looking at how to analyze data and make better predictions.
So that's varied.
Yeah. So, that was a big problem. Getting tenure, you're meant to be the world expert at one thing, and that's never been my forte. I've always done things I'm interested in, and I'm a curious person, and I hop from one topic to another depending on, what's shiny. And I think I have a good sense of what's going to be hot in the future, but I'm usually a few years ahead, and that's been a problem. So, you have to hit things at the right time. Timing is everything. But right now I'm interested in serious games and gamification, and I think that's going to be a hot topic. So I feel that at least is going to be a winner.
Yeah. Did you want to talk a little bit more about Centivisor and what it is and where it's being used right now?
Sure. So Centivisor is my, I don't know, depending on how you count, 3rd or 4th startup. So I'm a serial failed entrepreneur, and I have no business background, nothing in my family. So, but I did have a great grandfather who went bankrupt trying to market a patent he had on a special kind of office desk. So maybe failed entrepreneurship is in fact in my blood. So this 3rd time round, and I'm not looking for investment like in the past. I've got investors and everything, and it just seemed a bit difficult. So I'm trying to make this all go organically. So we have a series of prototypes that we've developed over a 6-year period, and the latest ones have really proven to be the best in terms of what seems useful. And we tested them out in long-term care and so on. So one of them is a cognitive assessment tool. We call it Brain Tagger. I think you're familiar with that one, Chelsea.
Yeah.
And this one is where we have these whack-a-mole games, and they test different aspects of cognition, like response inhibition and working memory and short-term memory and so on, which is different, and visual memory. And yeah, so we have about 7 games measuring different cognitive functions at the moment, and cognitive flexibility is another one I was forgetting about. And we have a website, and the whole thing is kind of there, but we're always trying to make it better. And then recently we've talked to psychologists about the idea of gamified psychometrics, where we take experiments and also turn them into games. And we're currently working with 2 psychology PhD students, one looking at psycholinguistics and one looking at music psychology. And we have 2 games that we've developed for those aspects, which I think are really interesting. So the idea is, once you're out of the lab and online, you need to control the person by gamifying the experiment. So you create the motivation to do the right thing. And it looks like it's working pretty well. So that's the Brain Tagger. And then we have a second product called Forever Young, or 4VR Young. And this one is a kind of a world travel experience. It's 360-degree videos that are presented in a VR headset, but you're using hand and foot pedals, and you have to keep pedaling if you want to keep moving. So it's like riding a bike. And if you stop pedaling, then you stop moving, but you can still look around. And then if you want to keep going again, you have to start pedaling. So it motivates leg exercise. And this one was actually, it was a long-term care home that came to us and asked us to develop this and told us what they wanted. So we've pre-sold 10 of these units to the long-term care home, and we'll be delivering them next month. And what we found there was that we wanted to make it so that you could look at any video. You can go and browse on YouTube, find a 360-degree video, and then watch it. And then the third product is called To Race With Me. And this one's another hand and foot exercise. But this time you are potentially racing with someone else. It's not a headset. It's a large flat screen display. And again, as you pedal, as you pedal faster, you move faster through the video. And you have like a racing course, so you can see where the other person is. So it's a lot like Mario Kart. And the other thing we do is we have video conferencing. So you can be talking to somebody else and going over the course with them, or maybe talking to a family member who's on a smartphone while you're doing the exercise. And one of the features we have is that when the person is pedaling, the family get a notification saying, do you want to talk to them? So it creates a very kind of natural interaction. You don't have scheduled meetings. It happens naturally. And the family member can just say no, and then there's no embarrassment because the person doesn't even know that they were invited. So you just have these kind of happenstance kind of meetings between family and seniors, and it's really important because there's a lot of social isolation in places like long-term care homes. So anything we can do to get the families more involved and make it easy for them, so it's not embarrassing. They're not sitting there worrying about the fact that their parent has dementia. They're just thinking about, okay, let's talk about the course you're going on. Let's talk about what
give them something else to kind of
something else
about,
to focus on. Yeah. And we have another feature we're trying to put out, which I think is a killer feature, and that is face recognition. And we watch when a person smiles, and when a person smiles, we take a 15-second video clip, and then we send it to the family, so they get a sense of the person's happy. So these are the three products. The Forever Young, we're going to trial in the long-term care home that we mentioned. And then for the others, we have 5 trials going on. We have 2 long-term care homes in New Brunswick. That's for To Race With Me. And we have the Humber River Hospital Church Activation Center in Toronto. And we're going to start a project with the North York General Hospital Seniors Health Center. And then we're also working with VHA Home Healthcare. So we'll be putting some of these units into people's homes and looking at the effects of having social interaction or no social interaction. So these are all funded projects that we're doing. So we're very excited. And then with BrainTagger, we currently have several researchers using it. We have a trial in China, which has several thousand people. And we're talking to a number of psychologists about modifying new games that they can use. And we also have someone in Korea. We have several people in Canada, and we're doing brain scanning. So we're having people play the games in a brain scanner. So far, we've had 13 people go through that, and we're hoping to build a sort of a validation of what happens in the brain when people use each of the games.
Yeah, and I know you also looked at how those games are related to the relevant psychological assessment that exists.
Yeah. In fact, you were involved in one of those papers. So thank you very much. So we have validated the response inhibition game against the go no go task, and early on we validated the cognitive speed aspect of the basic whack-a-mole game, which is now called Tag Me Quick, and that was done with the correct reaction time on congruent Stroop task stimuli. So that worked well. We're currently doing an NBAC validation with the working memory game. And what we found there is that the validation works, but only for NBAC 3. Because the whack-a-mole game is a little bit more difficult because you have to choose the holes. So we're now going to go back to do a version where you have to choose the location for the NBAC task, as well as choose the holes for the whack-a-mole, to see if we can get correlations with NBAC 2 and the second level of whack-a-mole, if we in fact make it equally difficult to choose the response. And,
awesome.
And we have other validations that we'll be doing in the future. We're looking at things like loneliness and whether COVID-related loneliness affects how well you perform in these cognitive assessments over time. So I think it's very exciting.
Yeah, and speaking of COVID, one of the other things we wanted to ask was, how have you been able to, do things virtually or kind of change your research focus this year based on what you've been able to do?
Yeah, so what's happened, and I think it's very good for us actually, is that everything got slowed down, and we kind of hunkered down, and we focused on product development. And so we've managed to get a lot of infrastructure built up. Like we've built up our programming team. We've got all the product from China. So we now have, we can now build 200 units. We built 100 of the button boxes. All of our devices use a button box, basically 6 big buttons that you press to control everything. All our interfaces are based on button selections, which makes it very easy for the older people. And so it really gave us a chance to build everything while we were waiting for the trials to start. We have talked to the trials. We've gone through, infection control and stuff, and we figured out, how to design our products so that they don't have infection problems, can be wiped down easily. With each of our projects, we're scheduled to start in the next couple of months. The only thing is we can't go into the hospitals. So we're talking, or the long-term care homes. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about how we can set up internal people like physiotherapists who can collect the data. And
who are already in there.
Yeah, and our goal is to get the students back into the facilities probably in the summer. But that works well for us because it means that we can bring in work-study students during the summer, and it helps us do the work because we have a lot of, obviously with 6 trials going on, it's kind of busy.
Yeah. And then I guess also you mentioned you had some data science and other projects going on, and those seemed, I guess, to lend themselves a little bit better to virtual research.
Yeah, you're right. The data science work can be done anywhere. It's nice to meet the physicians in person, but we can also work online. And I'll give you an example of what we're doing there. So there's a syndrome called delirium, which is acute brain failure, which tends to happen with older people, and it's very dangerous. There's about a much higher risk of mortality after you've had one of these incidents. You can think of it as the brain losing track of the outside world, becoming disconnected, confused, and people often go into emergency departments, and about 10% of the older people over the age of 65 will get delirium. So it's very serious because they're out of their normal surroundings. Maybe they get dehydrated. Maybe they are understimulated, underexercised, and the brain doesn't do well when there's not much going on. And often in hospitals, everybody's busy doing other stuff, and they can't look after people particularly well while they're waiting. So delirium happens a lot, and so recently there's been some methods to look at charts and do administrative chart review and figure out if a person had delirium based on what people were saying, what tests they were getting. So Mike's Hospital has a big project where they've taken data from 7 hospitals, soon to be 15 hospitals, in internal medicine, and they're starting to look at making predictions and doing secondary analyses of the data. So it's called the Gemini project, and it's led by a guy called Farhad Razak, who I have known for a few years, and it's been a wonderful opportunity for us to work with this team. But what's happened is we've developed these machine learning models for predicting when a person has delirium or not. I think we're in the mid 80s in terms of percent of predicting, but you have to understand that 25% of people in the sample were getting delirium. So if you bet non-delirium, you'd be 75% right? So when people says I'm 85% right, you have to understand it's like halfway from the baseline to perfect. So anyway, we have these prediction models, and we've been asked by Sunnybrook Hospital as a first kind of run on this to sort of predict how well they're doing. So we'll use our prediction model to predict how much delirium they're getting at Sunnybrook, and it's kind of a way of rating people and warning them about the delirium rate, even though they haven't gone and tried to label everybody because it's very hard to do. But these prediction models will now help us build a kind of proxy quality indicator. So we're kind of excited about that we can actually make a difference, perhaps, if we can show that the model's working.
Yeah, and that's something, if you're just working with the data, that you can still continue doing.
Absolutely. So we have a very good team. We have Lou, who's working on a second PhD, and then she's built a team of master students and 1 PhD student working with her. So it's a pretty powerful team at this point.
Great. So I guess 2021, it's a new year. What are some things you're kind of seeing as trends in human factors research for the next few years, or particularly in the research that you do? I guess, what are you looking forward to in the next couple of years?
I'm very biased, obviously, Chelsea. I think that gamified psychometrics and the idea of turning experiments into games is the way to go to create high quality data. So I'm really going to be pushing that idea. My dream is to create a kind of a gamified psychometrics institute at the University of Toronto, where people would kind of like do run all the experiments using games. We would help them. We would help set up the games for them, and then we would act as a repository for all the data. So that's the dream.
Awesome. Yeah, I guess any other thoughts you have about either UofT or human factors, like the current state of human factors, or anything else you want to share about your research?
Yeah, well, funny you should say that, because my student Bella, she's doing her master's with me, and she's got this side project going on human factors education and the future of human factors education. So we've been interviewing professors, and I've done maybe 3 or 4 of these interviews now, and it's really, really interesting to look at different perspectives on where people think human factors is going. I think I'll summarize the initial results, or my initial feelings about this, as the idea with human factors is that everybody looks at it and says, "Oh, this is common sense. You know, what are you doing? This is not a discipline. You know, we can do it just as easily as you." But of course, they can't, and they don't. So human factors is kind of a systematic approach to this sort of humans working with technology and devices and systems. And I think as the world gets more and more complex, there's more and more need for human factors, whether it be like autonomous vehicles, which are not really autonomous and still need the driver to take control sometimes, or whether it be in AI and machine learning, where again, the algorithms, you know, have some severe problems. You know, they may encourage, may decrease diversity. They may have unintended consequences. Again, you know, generally you need a person in there to add in some tacit knowledge and oversight. So I think things like interactive machine learning, you know, are going to be new disciplines, and I think the future is really bright. But the human factors people, I think, have to somehow keep their core strengths in things like, you know, systems design and human factors standards and principles and so on, and applied psychology, and yet learn new skills in terms of data science and machine learning, so they can be a bridge and create these sort of new technologies of people working together with other devices and systems. And the other big message that I get from some of these early interviews is communication is really important. That people who are doing human factors always have to be selling themselves, have to be communicating, have to be explaining the value. They can't sit back and expect people to understand and appreciate that. You know, we live in an activist discipline, and that's just the way things are, and it will always be that way. And I think people have to be activists when they get into human factors.
Definitely. Well, thank you for taking the time to be on the podcast. Any final thoughts to end the episode?
Well, the only other thing I want to say is that I think we have a wonderful program in human factors at UofT. You know, we have I think a wonderful group, and we've graduated some excellent people over the years. And you know, I think UofT is recognized as a center for human factors, at least the neck up variety. And you know, it's been a privilege to work here, and I hope that the students, you know, and the alumni, you know, and I'm sure they do appreciate, you know, just what a privilege it is to work in our community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you. It's been fun.
Thanks for listening to episode 2. Stay tuned for episode 3, where we'll be talking to another professor in the Human Factors group at UofT.